Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order for June 22nd. So, new agenda item.
Shouldn't be there.
Just the publication.
Oh, okay. Attest of publication.
I did not see it hanging, but it was posted on the website. Okay, so it was there. I just didn't check the vestibule.
I saw it online. So I just want to mention that Lisa is absent tonight and Shelley will be here momentarily. Approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Tina, seconded by Joni to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. I will read the district mission, vision, and values and our collective commitment. Mission, Bangor Pride, a small school building big futures. Vision, an innovative small school creating excellence through personalized learning and relationships for all. Values, student-centered, small class sizes, continuous improvement, professionalism, opportunities for all, safety, foster community, sustainability. As the Board of Education, our collective commitment, as a member of the Bangor School Board, I will be an active listener who is open-minded, respectful, and inquisitive. Together, with one collective voice, we are committed to forward thinking while strategically prioritizing for our students, staff, and community now and in the future. Public comments, we have no one that has signed up. Approval of the minutes from the May 18th regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Joni, seconded by Tina to approve the May 18th regular meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Closed session, May 18th.
I'll make a motion to approve the closed session minutes.
Second.
Motion made by Lori, seconded by Joni to approve May 18th closed session minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Nexus.
Julie, I'll just kick us off right quick. We've got Nexus and Baird here tonight. This is probably the biggest part of our meeting. We might have about 20 minutes after that. So some important feedback from the community session, staff engagement session, stuff that the district has been doing to look at our facility study. Kevin and Brian from Nexus will be back here tomorrow night for the board study session. We're going to dig in deep and starting to look at some of those changes that we can make to hopefully follow through on some of the requests and the comments from the community sessions. So you'll have a lot of chance to hit him up with questions tomorrow night. Brian from Baird is going to follow then, and Brian is here just for tonight, and we appreciate him driving down. So make sure you hit him up with all the questions that you want for him face-to-face tonight. And other than that, I can catch him later. But with that said, Kevin, if you want to get us rolling, appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me back tonight. If you want to jump to the next slide. Yeah, I just wanted to review just to start out. We've here in Bangor had a busy last 30 to 45 days or so. Highlighted really tonight, as David said, talking about late May, we had the staff engagement session, which was very productive discussion, and I'm going to review some highlights from that this evening. And then following up that following week, we had the community engagement as well, which was also very productive. Got a lot of great feedback out of that, and I'm going to talk to you about that tonight as well and give you some highlights with the idea of, as David said, being able to dive much more deeply into it tomorrow evening. Just for those watching online or those who have some interest, what I'm going to talk about tonight is actually derived from about 12 pages of very detailed notes that came out of those sessions. But tonight we're gonna hit on some highlights. So jump to the next slide for me. So starting out with the staff engagement, which was the first evening of our engagement. We had a great turnout that night, and a lot of great discussion. It started out with a presentation just to get the staff up to speed on where things had progressed in the facility planning process. And then it was really a lot of Q&A, a lot of discussion. And then we followed that up to finish up the evening with them being able to really submit their opinions, their questions, their feedback, which we captured. So we started to see some themes that came out of that evening for sure. And I've got 5 major themes that I wanted to share with the board this evening. The first one was that staff, they definitely have the desire to be involved in ongoing facility planning. So we talked to them about that night because they had the desire to get into a lot of detail that evening about where we were in the process and how they would have the opportunity to get very involved at different points in the process going forward. Another item that certainly stood out was they want to make sure they have the answers to the questions. And that's always promising to see from staff because your staff are really ambassadors out there in your community, and we want to make sure they have the answers to the questions as well. So that night, we certainly had an opportunity to answer questions. We directed them then, like we did with the community, and we've directed others who are interested to the website that's out there that's got background information on the planning process. And David's been a great resource, and of course, people can come to us through David if they've got additional questions as well. And we intend to keep doing that with staff as those come in. The third item that came out of it was district staff. They not only support the need for core educational spaces, but they also definitely spent time talking about their support for things like safety, security, special education, performing arts, athletic, and other support spaces within your buildings and grounds. The fourth item, district staff prioritizes additional classroom space over flexible or collaborative learning spaces. We'll talk more about that tomorrow, but basically what that means is they definitely said if it came to the point where the board and district had to choose between additional classroom space to support the delivery of the educational and learning goals over collaborative and flexible learning spaces. They definitely preferred that classroom space. And then finally, district staff, they want the community to have continued and additional access to utilize district buildings. So there were definitely questions, comments, feedback that night about some of the aspects of the concepts that they saw, whether it be the fitness center or some of the remodeling that we talked to them about at the old school gym, for instance, that they were very curious about how they could make sure the community shared in the future of the buildings as well. Any questions on staff? This is the one slide on staff. We'll definitely have more time tomorrow, and we'll be sharing with you kind of all the background data, but I just wanted to hit on the highlights with you tonight on staff. Okay, jump to the next one if you could then. On community. So a number of slides here just to break it out. The first one I'm going to talk about relative to community was really centered around how the community feels about how the district is performing. And I'd say overall some very, very good news here. And it's good news because definitely over my experience, if the folks in the district, the community members feel that the district is performing well on some specific aspects that we'll talk about here, relative to going out and asking support of the community, whether it be a referendum or whether it be other areas of support you need. They're much more willing, number one, to listen, and number two, in the case of a referendum, to provide that financial support if they feel as though the district's performing well. So the first major theme that came out of performance was district and board, they've done a good job maintaining facilities within the available budgets that you have. Second, the district and board, they've done a good job managing finances. And a number of themes came out of that. For instance, paying off debt early and decreasing the mill rate over time. Those were definitely recognized as positive steps. Third, a majority of the community members believe the district compares favorably to neighboring districts in terms of the taxes levied and investment made per student. So you may recall we have that graph we show that how you compare to neighboring districts in those aspects. The district provides a high quality education. They were definitely in agreement there. And then finally, overall, the district, they feel like you're doing a good job, and I would say overall a much improved job on informing the community. But they also, a number of folks said they also would like to see continued improvement. And those are just a few examples would be continuing to make tools like the website more user-friendly, continuing to make sure people have the opportunity that aren't as tech-savvy to have access to information and things like that. And those are things definitely within the notes that we captured. Next slide, if you could. All right, and then the next area of focus was how did the community feel about a facility referendum? So a number of interesting things came out of this discussion with those community members. First of all, majority of the community members that were present that evening, and I should backtrack for a second, we had roughly around 20, 21, 22 community members there that evening that were very engaged and did a great job of providing some very detailed feedback to us. They answered questions both individually and as a group around a number of topics that I'm giving you feedback on tonight. And again, we've captured all those very specific answers as well. So a majority of these community members, though, they supported the district and board pursuing a referendum to address facility needs. So they received a presentation that evening as well on facility needs, whether it be deferred maintenance or educational upgrades. Second, a majority of the community members supported the district and board pursuing a referendum below 24.9 million. And what I'm pointing at there is those blue boxes at the bottom. I want to run through those just for a second to tell you what I mean when I say below 24.9 million. So of the folks that evening, starting on the left there on the bottom, really they had four categories that they responded in terms of that question. So first of all, 37% of the folks there that evening said, yes, address all high priority maintenance and facility upgrades for the total of 24.9 million. Then when you look at the next category, another 42% said, yes, definitely we support a referendum, but we believe it should be less than 24.9 million. And there were various reasons for that. But in summary, they determined it should be less than 24.9 million. So when you add those two numbers together, you get 79% of the folks there that evening were supportive of a referendum level below 24.9 million. And then the remaining two blue boxes to the right there, 11% that evening, they weren't sure. They felt like they needed more information, which is certainly a natural thing to have happen at this point in the process. And then the final box in the blue box on the right is the 11% that said they would not support a referendum. And of the folks that said they would not support a referendum, generally it was because of financial related reasons, whether they felt like right now timing was an issue financially, or they felt as though it might be just too much of an ask at this point. So overall, though, as it says, a majority of the community members support the district board pursuing a referendum below 24.9 million. And also, they definitely, by a wide margin, recommended taking a fiscally responsible, balanced approach to prioritizing both deferred maintenance and educational upgrades. And that really then leads into the next slide. So we also asked them, after they'd seen the presentation on deferred maintenance and educational upgrade concepts, what projects or types of projects did they prioritize? So of the folks there that evening, roughly 30% of them commented, so the highest level of support were on safety and security and expanding and remodeling the old school gym. And I know that was, in terms of the old school gym, that was something that, in terms of the comments, that they felt that was a gem in the community, felt that was something that definitely merited consideration in terms of additional investment to maintain that building. The second category then, there were a number of things that fell into that. Roughly 23% of the folks supported. There was a catch-all doing all the high priority projects. There were a number of people there. But then more specifically, the elementary classroom addition, additions to both buildings. So that would be the classroom addition and the middle school, high school tech ed and fitness additions. There were some that definitely were in favor of tech ed and STEM at both buildings. Some specifically that fitness addition. And then there were some very specific responses relative to remodels to add single-user bathrooms at each of the buildings, and then a nursing room for staff at each of the buildings was also brought up a number of times. Again, these are all in the comments. The third category, about 15% of the respondents on average, was elementary remodel to increase classroom sizes, and then looking at investment in some of the high priority food service equipment as well at the buildings. And then finally, fourth category was the elementary remodel to create the commons, and then high priority ADA upgrades at both buildings. So you'll notice for the board members that have been heavily involved in this process in a very specific way in terms of us talking about projects, a lot of these are categories of projects. We've already, based on some of this feedback, started to think about how, based on these categories of prioritization and the overall dollar amount feedback, what are some things we could potentially do to help you tomorrow to begin thinking about where you might go from here. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that tonight, but I want you to know we've already started thinking about that, and I think there's some good tools we're going to use tomorrow night to help you further your discussion around these items. So jumping then to the next slide, it really gets back then to where we are in the planning schedule. So tonight we've got the board meeting. Tomorrow night we've got the board work session. Really the purpose tomorrow night is going to be discuss specifically prioritization of projects, financial scope, and then I think talk more so about the opportunity between now and your July board meeting are there specific topics that the board would like to receive additional feedback on from the community? Could it be on the financial aspect of this? Could it be on specific priorities around some of the projects? So there's tools that I'm going to talk to you about tomorrow evening that are more quick in terms of us getting feedback for you that we can definitely look at that would be able to provide even more data than we received already from staff and community engagement. So that is really what the next night or so looks like. And then really going to June, July, potentially getting more community feedback. We've got the July 20th board meeting, and then that board meeting really then will set you up to have additional discussion around project prioritization, financial scope, and then if the board determines they're at the point of doing so, giving some feedback on potentially any type of language around resolutions at that point. So basically, you're right on track is my message there. So while I'm here, any questions before Brian steps up that I can answer for you from the board? Otherwise, obviously, we'll be together tomorrow night.
Yeah, Kevin, I have a question. The detailed 12-page thing that you have, are we going to get that tonight, or are we going to get that tomorrow
You can
night?
definitely get it tonight. I can send it to David, and he can send it to you. And
That'd be great to have a chance to read it maybe before tomorrow's meeting.
Sure, absolutely.
I
Thank you.
agree. That'd be great.
Absolutely. Okay.
I would, I guess I'd just speak to the feedback was really good in all these sessions, and even the not so glowing feedback on communication and those types of things are important for us to hear. I do want to just make sure that the community is aware that there is a tab right on our website with the Bangor's facility planning process that has the full facility assessment and everything attached to that. And tomorrow night we'll brainstorm a little bit more as a board, talking about doing some potential polling in the community, doing some mailings, those types of things. That was loud and clear, that the good old-fashioned mailing was an important way to do it. Me offering a couple other additional sessions, there's kind of informal sessions talking about this, just so we can gain more feedback prior to the board drafting a resolution, if we choose to, if you choose to do that. So. Those are things that we did take to heart, and we really want to make sure to educate the community, make sure that everybody understands what it is that we're asking for, and start to get a sense of the level of support for that, so you guys can make the best decision that you can for the good of the district. So that's going to be a high priority between now and the July meeting. We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow night.
Has there been much interaction outside of our community session? Because obviously there wasn't a huge number of people. So as administrators, have you been getting other questions from people? No?
Not a tremendous amount. I mean, I had shared with the board, we did get one follow-up question from one of the people that were there about our enrollment numbers and open enrollment numbers. And I put that 10-year summary together, sent that to that community member. If that's something we need to put out to the whole community so they see that too as well, to kind of show that growth. It's not exponential growth. It's not really, but there is a trend over time, and it's definitely, it sure looks and feels like it's continuing when we look at enrollment.
I know I've given double-digit tours here in the last month, and I know I've talked about this process with each of the families that were, so I guess that's been our avenue. But as far as people coming up to me when I'm out front or something like that, it hasn't been, and nobody's really asked me any questions. So
That meeting wasn't on the calendar. It wasn't on the website, so it wasn't open to everybody. So that's why there weren't that many people there.
Were a lot of invitations sent out, though, wasn't there?
Yeah. What we didn't probably hit well enough was the entire community. With that, we did hit every organization and business that serves the community. So over 100, personal invitations were sent to people to send a representation from their company or organization, and we obviously put that out to the entire district in district level communications. But we did not do a community mailer or anything at that point in time for that. So we covered. We thought we had it covered. I think we could have done better there, Jack, but it did not go out to the entire community.
But the recommendation from you was to have those small working groups and send out these invites to certain,
Right. Yeah.
the
intent of that meeting that night was definitely looking at, for lack of a better term, the key influencers in the community, the folks that are well-respected folks that are visible in the community, that have their ear to the ground, so to speak, with the idea that we would have the option, which we'll definitely talk more about tomorrow night, because you make a good point, that there are tools that we can do fairly quickly that'll give us statistically accurate community-wide feedback at this point. It doesn't mean we need to talk to everybody in the community, but we can get data that will give us a representative sample of the community at this point too, if you have concerns about specific areas that you'd like more data on. So,
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin.
Brian, come on up. Brian is here from Baird.
all right. Good evening. Good to see everyone. Thank you for having me. As David introduced, my goal here tonight is to give you an overview of some of the initial planning concepts for various range of projects, right? So scope of work that you're working through right now, trying to identify the highest priority needs and what the community would like you to bring forward in the form of a referendum, because that's under current school law in Wisconsin, that's the primary methodology for seeking additional funding for large-scale capital investment. And so typically that takes the form of a municipal bond, and it's paid back for a time period up to 20 years from the time that you issue it. So with that, you'll identify the projects and scope of work. That will be an amount that you'll seek referendum approval to borrow an amount up to or not to exceed.
and then that will be repaid over a time period. I'll show you some illustrations, but the initial concept is phasing it in over a 2-year period, such that each of those borrowings are 20 years, so that from start to finish it's a 21-year repayment. Primarily, the reason Wisconsin school districts utilize that for new additions and upgrades to existing facility remodeling type projects is that the useful life of those assets that are being improved or added will live on significantly longer than that 20-year repayment period. So tonight we'll walk through the cash defeasance that the board has been implementing in the last few years. I'll provide an interest rate update as it relates to long-term municipal bonds for capital investments of this sort, and then some hypothetical scenarios for a referendum repayment plan. So this first slide is relatively busy, but the key elements are the left side of the left box represented the remaining payments on the remaining referendum approved debt from the prior referendum approval, which was 2007. You'll see that the rates on that debt are at 3%, and the payments go until 2027. As you know, you provided for an amount to begin to pay down that debt, avoid some interest cost, and shorten the repayment term. So the right box, the after defeasance box, if you look at the peach highlight, you'll see that there are now no payments due in 2027, and the payments due in 2026 are lower, such that what that means, when you're asked in the community, when is our current debt paid off? As we stand today, it's in 2026. The final payment is 2026. So doing that, you reduce the interest cost by about $41,000, and those payments on the debt will be eligible for state aid reimbursement when you receive your October certification this coming fall as you finalize the 22-23 school year. So this chart, for those of you that have been on the board for a number of years, you'd probably recognize this. This is one of my favorites, primarily because it's a simple way to consume the movement in municipal bond rates over time. And so this chart is a 30-year visual of a daily municipal bond index. So this index is a AAA rated generic scale, so it's not specific to what Bangor School District can borrow. It's a general movement in rates. And what I did here to help frame the current movement in rates is I highlighted with the yellow dashed line in 1996 and again in 2007. Those were the two previous large-scale, long-term investments in facilities that the district approved and implemented and paid off. So the original debt in 1996 was locked in at the high 5% range and low 6% range. That debt was refinanced in 2004. As you see, as the interest rates trended lower, that created an opportunity to reduce the interest rate, which then reduced the interest cost. And now that we're in 2022, that debt has been paid off. In 2007, the original interest rates were in the 3s and 4% range. And that debt in 2015, when we were establishing some new historical lows post the Great Recession, we were able to lower the rates on that debt to 2 and 3%, which again reduces interest cost and allows the debt to be paid off more quickly. In between there, you had a small 1998 referendum that was paid off relatively quickly, and then the 2010 referendum to demolish a previous gymnasium using 0% financing. So it was a stimulus bond provision that the federal government allowed for. So the district took advantage of a zero interest rate loan to pay off that project. So as you fast forward past 2008 and the Great Recession 2009, you see that interest rates have oscillated, but generally trended lower to set new 30-year and really, if I took this chart back into the 70s, it would be new 50-year lows. In 2020, you see that sharp spike higher. That was when the pandemic initiated, at least in America, and we had the shutdown, and the markets kind of freaked out and didn't know how to react to that. So rates moved higher sharply, and then from that point on, for the last 2 years, we've been hovering at historically low interest rate environment as we worked our way out of that the economic conditions related to the pandemic. Fast forward to the box, which is in the upper right corner of this chart. It's the past year, and specifically, it's really January of 22 through June of 22. As inflation prints that come out monthly have persisted at higher levels, higher than normal or higher than recent history. It's over 5, over 6, and in recent months it's been over 7 and 8% month over month CPI rates. The Federal Reserve has started to change their policy actions, the same policies that they put into place in the previous 2 years to keep rates abnormally low while we had the forced shutdown and trying to not have an economic collapse or a recession during that time period. They pumped a lot of money into the market. They bought a lot of debt in the public market to keep rates low. So in the months in 2022, they've been reversing some of those actions, right? So they are not actively buying in the secondary market, which affects the long-term rates. And on the short-term rates, which is what we see in the newspaper more often, when, like last week, for instance, the Federal Reserve decided to raise their overnight lending rate by a 0.75%, which that number, that 0.75, is the highest single increase since 1994. But you have to take it in context. We're coming off of a 2-year period where we were at 0 to 0.25 was the rate. That was the overnight lending rate. And their target is to try and get back up above 3. And so in order to do that, and in order to have an effect on trying to slow down the inflation pressures that we're seeing in the economy, they're taking larger than typical actions to do that. So currently, that overnight lending rate is at a 1.5 to 1.75. Like I said, they're trying to, they're signaling that they would like to get that up to over 3%, that range. So there's a meeting next month. They'll likely raise it another 0.5 point to a 0.75 next month, and then likely some additional later in 2022. Ultimately, the goal of that is to turn off some of the liquidity that they turned on in reaction to the pandemic, right? So they're trying to counterbalance what was implemented over the last 2 years and trying to, kind of manage their control over what happens in the general market related to cost of funds. So during that time, that's translated into this municipal borrowing rate ratcheting back up relatively quickly in the first 6 months of 2022 to the current level where you see the dotted line going across the page. But if you look at that in perspective, we're still lower than the pre-recession borrowing levels. So while it feels a lot higher than a year ago, and it is, on a nominal basis, school districts were borrowing in the 1% and 2% range for 20-year financings. Right now, school districts are borrowing in the high 3s and low 4s for school district financings. But historically speaking, and that's part of why I highlighted the previous Bangor referendums, that's still historically low from a locking in of a public investment to be repaid over a 20-year period. Any questions on that? Because that is one of the key variables that we'll talk about. You'll get questions about it in the public. It'll be one of the variables as we talk about tax impact, what it translates into for a principal and interest payment and equivalent impact on the mill rate. So, this is what I live and breathe every day. I know hopefully you don't have to look at this every day, but this is, something you're probably hearing about from your neighbors, coworkers, or financial news. So any questions on this topic before I move into some of the other detail?
You talk about typically 20 years for schools. Why is it 20 years? Do people go 20 years always, or does it change?
It certainly change. It can change. So the 20 years is the constitutional maximum that a school district or a public entity can borrow using your general obligation levy and pledge to repay. So 20 years is the maximum borrowing limit using that general obligation pledge. If a school district's doing a project that has like a 7-year useful life or a 10-year useful life, you'll see that being paid off quicker. Generally speaking, if you're talking additions or core infrastructure updates that will last 30, 40, 50 years or longer, you typically will see that paid for over a 20-year period, primarily because you're matching the benefit of the new asset with who's paying for it over time, right? So if you could certainly save some interest costs and pay it off in 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, but then the residents that live here during those first 5, 7, or 10 are paying for something that will benefit residents from 11 through 50, right?
And do these interest rates stay the same regardless of the years?
So when you go,
if you borrow at 10 years or you borrow at 20 years, is it the same constant rate, or do those rates change depending, just like everything else?
Yes,
like a house loan always changes. So do we have a benefit on looking at the years that we're looking to borrow for?
Yeah. So when it's different, so a school bond is different than a mortgage where you go to the bank and they'll give you one rate. And that rate is based on, is it a 30-year mortgage, a 20-year, a 15, a 10, right? Here, I think it's really 20 different securities. So year one's rate will be the lowest rate. Year 5's rate will be higher. Year's 10's rate will be higher. Year 15, and then year 20. In a typical interest rate environment, the 20th year is going to be the highest. So when we talk about our
savings on this last one would have helped then. So on your last slide, you talked about how we're paying off years earlier. We're paying off those much higher interest rates at that time for that.
And you're just paying it off quicker. So you're not incurring those years of interest, right? So you're avoiding.
So it's not really a stable rate. It changes on the years of the bond.
Well, I just don't want to confuse the message. So it once you've locked it in, it's fixed.
Right.
It's
okay.
The whole 20 years.
Right.
I just don't want, because there are loans that are like a variable rate loan or an ARM type rate or something like that. That's not what the school district would do. The school district would say, this is our repayment plan. You'll go out, after the referendum, find investors, agree to those rates for the 20 years, and then they're locked for that period. Where I think you're asking though, if you did a 10-year, would that average rate be lower, like a 10-year rate for a mortgage versus a 30-year rate for a mortgage? Yes, because you're borrowing it for a shorter period of time, the investor is expecting a lower rate of return for that. The problem is the payment would, if you go from a 20 to a 10, the payment that you need to build into the levy, it doubles, right? Or nearly doubles, because you're paying off that second 10 years of principal in the first 10 years.
Okay.
Similar to your home mortgage, right? Like that's kind of the discussion when you're, what are you building into your payment in your home budget, right?
I'm just thinking of our final cost of what we want to take out. So say that the common goal is 20. So are you better off doing 10 and 10 and then reprioritizing in 10 years again on what's needed? Or are you better off going the full 20, paying off early like we did the last time? So I was just trying to understand the difference in rates and how they apply, I guess, is where I was going with it. I was trying to understand the difference between long-term, shorter term, and then the amounts that we're potentially going to go out and ask for.
So what you're thinking through, would you do fewer projects, which would be a smaller
Right.
amount, pay that off over 10, and then reevaluate 7-8 years out what the current needs then look like, and then you have from year 11 and thereafter to work with.
I was just
similar to what you're doing right
I was
now.
just trying to understand the difference, the benefits of what we just did, paying off early, getting rid of that higher interest rate at the end, but then prioritizing the 20 years is good because then you're able to put more things in one location. It's just determining what needs to be done, I guess. So I was trying to.
Yeah,
Justify, I
and
think.
the other factor that goes into this in that discussion, and it kind of ties into work that you'll probably hear tomorrow night. It's what is the need? What do you want to address now, right? Because this chart is just secondary, right? The starting point is, do the facilities have needs, and do you as a board and with the community's input want to address those needs, right? Where I'm going with that is that if there are needs and you wait 10 years, the cost of those investments in construction inflation, which has hovered in the 5 to 7 range in typical years, annually. So compounding, the cost of the same project grows, each year 5 to 7%, so that by the time you get out to that 10th year, the same project costs more. So maybe you avoided locking in an interest rate in the 4s, let's say, for that period of time. But did you really save if you're going to do that need is still there, right? So that needs to factor into the discussion as well.
Right.
Okay. Other questions on this? We can revisit it as well, but okay. So the discussion last year when you set out to pay down that debt, it was partly avoiding the interest costs, partly receiving the state aid reimbursement, and it's partly continuing to pay off that debt to position the district for whatever future investments lie ahead. So this is a hypothetical illustration for budget setting for 22-23. This assumes the same amount of levy that is in this current year budget, the 21-22, which is a payment of about $820,000. So this says if you levy $820,000 again this fall, you would then chip away at the remaining portion of 2026 and portions of 2024 and 2025. Ultimately, the reason you'd take a portion of each of those is that you are creating room within that payment amount for some amount of new investment related to a potential referendum approval. So that would save an additional $33,000 as an estimate, and then again, state aid on that prepayment comes in the following fiscal year. So that leads us to 2 detailed pages, which is one of the reasons I gave you printed versions, because this is hard to read on the screen. But this is how, when David and Angie call and say, hypothetically, we're looking at this amount or that amount, this is how we model the existing payments, which is that first column. So think of that column as your remaining payments on the 2007 referendum debt. The box is a hypothetical 20-year repayment. And in this illustration, what I was solving for is how much could you borrow at the same mill rate that's built into your current mill rate for debt. And key assumptions to think about there are the interest rate. Right now we're using a 4.5 for this illustration. As rates continue to move higher this year, we might need to move that estimate higher. But right now we're using a 4.5%. The other factor that is down here in these footnotes is your state aid reimbursement is currently 24.5%. So on every dollar the district spends, you receive 24.5 cents back the following year in the form of state equalization aid. So each dollar costs you about 75 cents, whereas there are districts in the state that that's the reverse, and they're negative 25%. So every dollar costs them $1.25, right? So that's a key variable to understand. Letter E here is your equalized valuation. Currently, the total value of all of the taxable properties within the boundaries of the Bangor School District totals $356 million. That value has grown on average over the last 8 years over 5% a year. Year over year, 5%. I personally don't like projecting that what happened in the last 5 to 8 to 10 years will happen in the next 5 to 10 to 20. I prefer to be conservative on the modeling such that if it does keep happening and there are new neighborhoods and new growth and new investments within the communities that the district serves, that will make these mill rate estimates come in lower when it actually happens in future years. So what we're using to be conservative here is 3% for the next 2 years, 2% for the next 2 years after that, 1% for 2 years after that, and then 0% thereafter. Okay? So to the extent those are, to the extent you don't grow, that means the mill rate ends up a little higher than what we're showing here. To the extent you grow closer to the 5 that you've been growing, then the mill rate comes in lower than what we're illustrating here. So the main driver of this page and the one I'll show you next is the fourth column from the right. It says existing Fund 39, which is your referendum approved debt fund. That's where you levy for the payments and referendum approved debt. Your current payment is $820,000, and it steps up into these new payments and levels out at about $950,000. So about $130,000 increase in the payment over that 20-year period. That, with the reimbursement of state aid at 24%, arrives at maintaining approximately your $2.30 on the mill rate attributable to referendum approved debt. That gets you about $11,750,000 for project scope. So that would, think of that as if we try to work within what's already baked into our budget, our current total school mill rate, how much of projects can we do given these assumptions? And that's just shy of $12 million. Okay. So the next page is the exact same concepts that I just walked through in detail. The difference is, as we said, well, what if it's 20 million? What does that do to that payment? So you look at that existing Fund 39 debt plus new. So you go from 820,000 and you're stepping up to about $1.5 million as your annual payment. So it's about a $700,000 increase in that payment for debt related to referendum approved projects. With the aid reimbursement at the 24%, that arrives at an estimated mill rate change from $2.30 up to about $3.40. So it's about $1.10 on your school mill rate. So $1.10 per thousand of property value. So here you'll notice that we split, because the scope of the work is higher, You're likely, this will be in conjunction with Nexus, but you'll likely not spend 20 million in that first year of construction. So we illustrate this as a split borrow, borrowing some amount. Here we did 10 and 10, but this is just one snapshot. You know, we could do 15 and 5 or 13 and 7 or, you know, some different amount. But the key is that you're borrowing it in two phases. Each are up to 20 years in total. And so one of the reasons for that is that final year of the 2024 borrow is paid in this final year, which ends up being 2044. So it's one additional year of residents that are benefiting from these investments that will last well beyond the repayment of this debt. Questions on that conceptually? Yeah. The reason for doing two amounts is that the reason we start with 10 and 10 is there's a federal benefit to what they term small issuers, and the definition of a small issuer in the tax code is an issuer that borrows 10 million or less in a calendar year. So basically what happens is they give banks an incentive to focus on and buy debt issued by small issuers. So that's why we start with that. But the benefit of that changes in every market cycle. So it may, if it looks like rates are going to move higher, you may still be better off borrowing 15 in the first borrow, as long as it matches the spending schedule of what you'll spend in that first 2 years, and then coming back and doing a smaller amount as that second borrow. So, I mean, that's why we use 10 and 10, but again, it may not end there. Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. Correct. No, I mean, it means that, so remember these two rates that we have here, the averages of 4.5 and 4.5. I mean, those are just example rates, you know. So if it's 10 and we're gaining the benefit in a normal market cycle, the benefit's about a quarter point to 0.35, somewhere in that range. So it may allow us to have more room under the 4.5 that we're illustrating here, right? That's where you would see the difference. But if we think rates are going to go up between now and the time we borrow the next one, it may be beneficial to just lock in at that 15 level, right? So this is the minutia and the detail and the moving parts that go behind this next screen, which is kind of this one's probably, as you're talking through scope with Nexus tomorrow night and then kind of beyond it heading into July, this is kind of a cheat sheet for what the previous two illustrations were showing. Ultimately, the first column, that 11,750,000 is effectively, you know, what is no increase over the current mill rate for referendum debt, right? So again, that's just shy of that 12 million. The 20 million is the example I just showed, and that's about $1.10 per thousand. And then if you look at the property values, so what that translates into, for every $100,000 worth of property, the annual increase is $110. And then on a monthly basis, it's $9.17. And then for you know, you can multiply each of these by what your property value is. But, you know, I put a 200,000 and a 300,000 in here for ease of discussion as well. And then I did the same illustration for what was the top end of the scope that was discussed in the previous meeting, and you got feedback on the 24.5 million worth of scope of projects. That, using the same assumptions as I discussed on the previous two slides, that would be about $1.78 per thousand for the referendum approved debt portion of the budget. So $178 increase per 100,000 of property. Okay. Questions on that, or how to use it? I guess one thing I do want to add, the likely when you go through that scope of work, it won't land on one of these three. so a factor that's something to use. It's rough, so we would update and finalize once you tell us what the scope is. But a rough rule of thumb in that range, every million in between there, it changes it by about 15 cents on that mill rate. So like, for instance, if 20 million goes to 21 million, it's about you can assume it's going to be about $1.25. And if it goes to 19 million, you can assume it's going to be about 95 cents.
Brian, I'm just going to, just for clarifying, and you've covered some of this, but just, I think it's good to hear again, you've got that maximum annual or maximum monthly type of impact. There's still, the maximum is still in quotations, I think, a little bit, because there's things we don't know. But when you figure the maximum, can you talk through one more time some of the factors that may actually help that over time to not necessarily stay at that amount the whole time?
Yeah, and those are generally what I'm highlighting down below, which is why I muddy up my page with all these detail assumptions that, when we're doing brochures later in the process, I will want you to have these assumptions there because it matters, right? Because it's the 4.5% interest, right? That will impact what that translates into mill rate, right? So the lower that rate ends up, the lower the mill rate can be, right? The higher that goes, the higher the mill rate can be. The growth is probably one of the biggest impacts, right? We're using 3, 2, and 1, and then 0. If you could stay at 5 for another couple of years, and then it goes to 3, and then 2, and then levels out at 2, that's going to make these mill rates a lot lower in actuality in those future years. And then state aid, right? So, we're using the 24%. If there's additional state aid, that also helps to offset the local share of these referendum-approved debt payments. So those are factors that, if they come in better than the planning estimates, that could lower what you're seeing as the estimated maximum here.
Thank you. And, those are the same types of conservative type estimates that we have made, that you have helped make to the Bangor School District for a lot of years. So I wanted to kind of to stress that. So thank you.
Yeah, and I wish I could say, it's definitely going to be this, right? But as we've seen, and as I showed on that chart, it moves, right? And what we will do is, if you lock in that original financing and it's 475, right, or 5, it will continue to fluctuate. There is some concern that if the Fed goes too far with what they're currently doing, it may slow the economy too much, and we may end up in a recession again, which then means that some of these rates may end up coming back down to where we've seen, right? That's part of why the post-Great Recession, we're now 12 years later, and we still haven't gotten back up to where those rate levels were pre-Great Recession, right? So point being is, the rate doesn't really drive when you need the investment. The need drives that. And then we will manage the financing like you did in the 96 and like you did in the 2007. You locked it in when you had approval and had a project to do. And then when the market allowed for, we get together again and say, hey, rates are a point or 2 points lower. Let's refinance it and lower that interest cost. So, over that 20-year period, you can rework the loan as you go.
Your example with the 10 and 10 kind of helped with the 20-year idea for me versus a smaller 10-year, because it seems like it's one, but with two separate things within that one. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes, right. This is all one scope of work.
Right.
But it can be implemented, like I've done referendums where it was like a 10-year capital plan, right? And from a single referendum, you have up to 5 years to borrow for it. So what that district did was they said, here's what our plan is. Do you like our plan? Voters said yes. So we locked in the first portion, and we left room in the overall structure for, at the end of those 5 years, to come back and issue that remaining portion that paid for the final 5 years of the capital plan. So that's an extreme example where that district wanted to stretch out the scope of work. And it also helped the scope, stretch out that matching of the investment in the assets of the district with those that are paying for it over time.
And can you do that same idea regardless of the amount? So like you have 20 million on this example. Can you do it at any amount that we
Yes,
go
I
to?
can-
So
I can-
you
I
can,
could do it
you
for
can
the
change the
12.
amount and you can change the years. And okay.
Yes, yeah. So short answer is yes. I mean, we can do this for 6 million too. I mean, you're trying to pick what are the variables that we're dealing with at the time you have approval. So what looks like it saves the district the most in the total financing plan, right? So visually, like taking those detail pages and trying to simplify them for public consumption when you're using it as a brochure or a handout at a public forum discussion, effectively this is what you're doing. You have the black portions of this stack bar are the remaining payments that are baked into the current budget to pay off the remaining portion of the 2015 debt, which was originally authorized by the 2007 referendum. And we're layering in the blue, which is the scope of work that would be authorized related to an upcoming referendum. So it's that increase from what's currently built into the budget up to what the estimated new maximum amount would be.
I just hope there's a lot of people listening because this is very hard concept public school finance and bond issues and, just to try to explain that you're paying off 3% debt just so you can borrow at 4.5%, to the average person is going to sound crazy. It's just that you need all of these working parts to understand it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't classify it the way that you're classifying it there. You're paying off the previous investment to make room for the next investment, right? The 3 and the 4 happen to be the numbers that we're currently talking about.
Correct.
6 months ago, we were talking about 3 and 1 or 2. Right?
This is correct.
So because you're right, if you explain it that way, that won't make sense. But it's more kind of managing the total school budget in a way that you are positioning the district to be ready for when the public says, yes, we see the need and we agree that this is the time to take action and invest in the portions of the facility that we haven't addressed recently. Other questions? I think that was my last slide, yeah. So other questions tonight? Again, doesn't have to be the last conversation. I just know it's prepping a conversation tomorrow night and then heading into a July discussion as well.
I thank you. And again, as people ask, we'll encourage them to go to YouTube and watch the video from tonight if they haven't seen it, because I think Brian's presentation was outstanding. There's no question that the timing, is hard right now, just with the instability and the unknowns of what happens next. I think your statement about if there are projects that need to be taken care of, then that's what should be addressed. And, then it will be, the responsibility of the district to continue to manage that debt over time. And we've shown, I think you've shown there nicely, and the district has done a great job of managing that debt over time, positioning themselves over time as this last debt is paid off to potentially, take the next step for our district and do some great things for kids in our community. So thank you, Brian, for all of your time. And if there's questions, I'll make sure I get them to you, and we can go from there.
I guess one final thought that I would have leaving, timing-wise, under the current state law, there are 3 cycles to ask a question in a biennial cycle. So this year, because we're in an even year, there's 2. There's a spring and a fall. And then next year, the odd year, there's just the spring. So, you know, I know recency and gas prices and inflation numbers in the newspaper, but keep in mind that some of that is relative to what we have recently heard in the last 2 years, which have been abnormally low, designed by the Fed, right? Like they actively tried to keep rates low. So yes, we are higher than where we were, so that might feel worse. Mortgage rates seem, you know, they are higher than where they were. You could do 2s and low 3s, right? Now we're talking 5s and 6s, right? But the district's cost of funds are still in a much better scenario than where you approved the previous 2 large-scale, long payback issues in 96 and 2007. So it shouldn't be the driver of the discussion. The discussion should be focused on the scope of work, what would be addressed, what does the community think you eventually will need, because waiting doesn't necessarily help this, right? And it won't help the cost of what an addition will be, right? Because that will generally go up. I don't know how many years it's gone down, right? It went down probably during post-Great Recession, but not for very long. Yeah. So I guess the summary is that waiting for a maybe better time in rates could be a flawed thought process, because even if we head towards a recession and rates come back down, that timing might work well for a fall discussion or a spring discussion. But it's really, if you can lock in under 5 and fix the cost of the projects in 22 and $23, you know, inflation, construction inflation type dollars, you're avoiding 5 to 7 growth in 2024, 25, 26, you know, at some point in the future, right? You're really just kind of chasing that discussion. So again, it's picking the time of when is the need, what is the need, should we be addressing the need since we're approaching the end of our previous investments, and then we'll manage that 20-year, as David highlighted. We'll manage the repayment term and the rates over that time period. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you for driving up.
you're
We
welcome.
appreciate it, and drive safe heading back, and we'll let you know if we have another questions.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Kevin did send the notes while Brian was talking, and you have them now as well from the community session.
Thank you,
So,
Kevin.
thank you to both you gentlemen. Drive safe.
Okay, moving on, Board President's Report, correspondence. I do not have any. Committee reports, Transportation Committee.
Not really a report, but just kind of a reminder as we get started in the new year. Joni, Shelley, and Lisa, if you're still willing to be a part of that committee for the transportation, our bus inspections are happening in end of June here, so I'd like early July to try to schedule something with you guys to kind of talk through what that is and just kind of talk through some other transportation related questions. I just wanted to take this opportunity tonight to make sure the 3 of you are all still good there, and if you guys have specific time periods that would, or weeks in July that work better for you or don't work for you, please let me know. You can email me or talk to me after the meeting tonight. So some things to talk about, and we never actually got together last year, and I know 2 of you have been on so many of the B&G committees this spring, so don't try not to take a lot of your time, but want to make sure that we're all up to speed. So, thanks.
All right, moving on to financial documents.
Yeah, I had no questions come through with these. Angie didn't talk to me about any questions that came through, so looking for approval for the activity accounts, the general accounts, and the June financial report.
I will make a motion to approve the activity accounts, the general accounts, and then the financial report.
Second.
Motion made by Lori, seconded by Joni to approve the financials, including the Fund 21 checks, general account checks, and June 22nd final report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. District reports, informational. David?
Yeah, just a real quick one. A few months back, we approved Stein Counseling setting up some counseling services for us, and we knew that that was going to be a lengthy process before they could actually get certified and be ready to take place in our buildings. Just letting you know that that is set. So we currently have AJ Falker's counseling services, counseling and consulting services that works with us on Thursdays with a number of children at both the elementary and middle. Her fees are all covered by the insurance for the students, so there's no cost to the district. We're just providing them the space to have those services and helping connect families to that service. Stein, we will be starting in the fall doing the exact same thing, so there will be no additional cost to the district. Just again, another group that we can really make sure that we're meeting all of the needs in our community, and we're looking at having them being in our building on Tuesday. We have had conversations, and just a brief update, we have had conversations with a couple of the companies around the area. You guys are familiar with the employee assistance program for our employees, that they're, it's kind of a one fee per kid type thing, for the year. And that amount then covers so many visits or whatever it may be. There isn't something like that that's in place for kids right now. And we're working with actually 2 different companies to kind of look at what that might look like. And I would hope to come back to you in the next couple of months with a potential proposal. Specific student sessions with a therapist can't be covered by a grant that we received that I had let you guys know about, the mental health supports, but they do approve like an employee assistance program type thing. The problem is that doesn't exist right now for students. So we are looking to kind of develop that with a couple of different companies and just having that conversation. What we envision that would give us the ability when we're having some questions or concerns, we may be able to have that person come in, meet a couple of times in a less formal setting, and give us some feedback on something that we might be able to do here in building to help, or to say, it would be really good to get this person in a regular rotation, get their insurance information, and get them rolling. All of that in an effort to just remove barriers and get kids the support that they need as fast as we can get it to them. So just wanted to provide that update that we are making some progress there, and there's definitely a need that we want to be able to be responsive to as quickly as possible. So just a little information on that tonight.
Any questions? Thank you, David. So moving on to district action agenda, resignation of elementary music teacher Piper Shaw.
Yeah, Piper has been here for 2 years and has done a great job in our elementary music program. Wanted to take the opportunity and go kind of back to the home area and has resigned effective at the end of the school year. So looking for approval of that resignation. We thank her for her time in the district.
I'll make a motion to approve Piper's resignation.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Lori, seconded by Shelley to approve the resignation of elementary music teacher Piper Shaw. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next, resignation of our elementary special ed teacher, Anna Dubanovich.
Anna found an offer that she couldn't refuse in another district. She served our district for 4 years, did an incredible job. She will be greatly missed in her position, and we wish her all the best in her future endeavors, but looking for approval to accept the resignation for Anna.
Move to approve resignation of Anna Dubanovich.
Second.
Tina? Motion by Joni, seconded by Tina, to approve resignation of elementary special ed Anna Dubanovich. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Hire middle school teacher.
I'll let Rick talk a little bit, and then I've got a quick story to tell as well.
Sure, thank you. We're looking for approval of Kristen Schaub. She's actually a Bangor graduate, 2018. She finished up with a turbo this year. When I called, she was student teaching at Herman Elementary in Sparta, and I called the principal there for a reference, and it was a glowing reference. And 10 minutes later, he went down and told her he wanted to hire her and to not accept the job. She did a long-term sub and cashed him. When I called the principal up there, she said, if you don't hire her, please send her our way. I mean, her references were just glowing, and she was definitely the committee's choice.
And I would just add, it was a fun, when I had her come in for her final interview, she informed me that 4 years ago to the day from that date, she had asked Don Addington if when she finished college that he would hire her to come back and teach here. So Don wasn't here, but she was definitely the choice of that committee, and I was happy to give her the offer 4 years to the day later, and we're excited to have her as part of our team.
And she was, as a senior, was voted most likely to teach in Bangor. Which was ironic. I guess I didn't remember that, but she also has a special education minor.
Yep. So looking for approval of the hire
Where did you place her on the salary schedule?
at A1. 1A. A1.
I'll make a motion to approve the hire of Kristen Schaub as a middle school teacher effective for the start of the 22-23 school year.
Second.
Motion made by Shelley, seconded by Joni, to approve the hire of Kristen Schaub for our middle school teacher. It's starting this school year 2022. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Varsity boys basketball coach.
Go ahead.
We're looking for approval for Nick Meacham. As you know, you approved the resignation of Jacob Peterson a month ago. Nick has been on the staff for quite a while with Jacob, and before that with Jordan as well. So he's looking to step up to our head varsity coach, and it looks as of right now the 3 other assistants will stay with him. One of them will move up to JV, and then the 2 of them will be staying as volunteer assistants, and then they're looking for a C team yet. They've been talking to a couple of people.
I'll move to approve the hire of Nick Meacham for varsity boys basketball.
I'll second that.
Motion by Joni, seconded by Shelley, to approve Nick Meacham for the varsity boys basketball coach position. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Speech and language contracts.
Yeah, this is, I guess, approving the hire, but just approving the total contracts for our speech and language. As you guys know, this position has been posted for well over a year as a full-time position, and we have had no applicants come through, traditional applicants looking for a full-time speech position. We were very, very fortunate this year to have Vicki Barrett come in and serve as kind of a 3-day-a-week, 0.6 type position where she worked with kids and also gave direction for a support teacher to work with the kids on the days that she was not here. In talking to Vicki a little bit this year, she said that she really loved being here, and would just really like to be able to do part of the caseload on 2 days a week and not have to prepare for the other kids. So if she said, if you can find another part-time person, that would be incredible. A few days later, with the posting out there, we actually had a person reach out with some interest. Jeannie Yanger, also a retired speech and language teacher, 45 years of experience, looking to get to 50 as a speech and language teacher, reached out and was very interested in a part-time position within the district. Josh and I and Vicki and Jeannie all sat down and we kind of talked through the logistics of that and came up to what we feel is a really good plan with a ton of experience that they're going to cover. Vicki will stay 40%, so 2 days a week, and Jeannie's going to go 60%, and we are going to cover that position at least for another year, and then we'll reassess throughout the year this year and, consider if we're going to post again for a full-time position. So some more on the administrative comments on the individual contracts and some of those types of details, but feel this is a really great combination with a ton of experience for our kids moving forward. So creative solution to a tough hire. So looking for approval of both these contracts for Vicki and for Jeannie.
So with all Jeannie's experience, I'm assuming she's actually licensed. She's not working under Vicki. They are really truly co-teaching then.
They are co-teaching. They've already divided up the caseload, so they each have their section of the caseload and gonna each work with their groups of kids. Yeah, and they'll meet regularly and kind of talk. Does that need to be balanced to make it work better? Who will take the new incoming and all of those types of things. So they've worked very well together, and the couple times we've had them together, and it's going to be a great fit.
I'll make a motion to approve the contracts for Vicki and Jeannie.
I'll second.
Motion by Lori, seconded by Tina to approve contracts for Vicki Brett and Jeannie, is it Yanger, as speech and language pathologists for the 22-23 school year. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
All right, and
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The last item there is kind of a housekeeping. We approved the pay raises for confidential staff and admin and all of those things at the last meeting and closed session. We talked through some of the contract changes that we were going to be making, and I had shared with you that we'd be working with Bob to update the confidential contracts and our school site contract to be in line with the legal requirements. So this is, providing the board the opportunity to look at those changes and see how things have changed over time, or it changed to these new contracts. Again, worked through with Bob. In that, we identified just in the groups of employees that we've looked at, we had not looked at the contract for our athletic director. So this is applying his contract is applying the same pay increase for him as the admin and confidential groups. And the other change in here is, kind of laid out in there was something I identified as a real discrepancy in pay for one of our confidential employees when I looked through the individual contracts. So just trying to make that more in line with other positions within the district. So looking for final approval, a little bit of compensation change for the AD and the one confidential employee as presented there, and then just the overall format of the new contracts I wanted you to be able to see.
If no one has any questions, I'll move to approve the confidential contract, school psychologist contract, AD contract, and pay adjustment for one confidential contract for the 22-23 school year.
I just want to clarify, it's 4.7 for everybody except the two contracts, Josh and Jean, which are more than 4.7, right? Okay, so it's 4.7 for everyone else.
I'll second.
Motion by Joni, seconded by Lori, for the final approval of confidential contracts, school psychologist contracts, AD contracts, with 4.7% increase for AD and pay adjustment for one confidential contract for the 22-23 school year. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone. On to administrative reports. Mr. Chaplin is not here.
Yeah, I won't go through that. I do think there's a couple of just noteworthy things there. If you look at the special education enrollment from his October count until the end of the school year, we've seen a 25 student increase in that special ed case count. And he lays out in there, you can see the move-ins and the people who were dismissed and students graduating, the students found eligible and found not eligible, all of those types of things. Overall decrease actually in our 504 plans, so you can see that as well. As we look at that increase, in the caseloads, and I've been in communication with the board along the way as we look at our two elementary special ed hires. That may be enough to help wash out and make that 0.775 contract a full-time contract. So we do not have finalists for those positions yet. We've got a couple more interviews coming up. It has been tough, and there's a good chance that in some way, shape, or form we may be looking at some alternative licensure path for one or more of the candidates in that pool. So we'll get creative, and we'll make sure that we've got some great staff in front of kids for next year. Additionally, in Josh's report, the WCAS awards. So the Wisconsin Council of Administrators of Special Services that Josh is a part of recognizes top educators throughout the state each year. And in this case, this year, Michelle Harper, one of our middle school special ed teachers, as well as Sarah Langer, a second grade teacher at Bangor Elementary, were both recognized as outstanding educators through the WCAS organization. So just a shout out to both of them, and thanks for all the work that they do with our students each year. Any other questions I can direct to Josh, let me know.
Thank you for reporting for Mr. Chaplin. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Julie. Been a busy couple weeks getting ready for summer school. It started on Monday. Off to a great start. Looking at just an overview of numbers, over 230 students this year participating from grades 4K through 8th, and 23 teachers working. And it's really cool is we got 22 high school helpers over there, so we almost have like, I don't want to say too much help, but it's pretty awesome that we got some young adults over there working with our youngest learners, and they're great. They're doing an awesome job. Any questions on summer school at all? Going pretty smooth. Library summer plans. Lindsay and David and I have been talking about some options for summer. I just wanted to give you a heads up on this. It's kind of a neat opportunity. Lindsay and I came up with July 20th. We're going to try to open up the elementary library from, right now it's set at 5 to 6:30. We haven't put it out there yet. We're just kind of working on some details, but just some ideas for kids to come into the school with their families and check out some books from our library. Right now they're working on finalizing all of the inventory of our library, so that's ongoing. But just to get books in hands, something I'm toying with. I was kind of scratching up some notes today, but to have when options there to have kids come into a classroom, and I would enjoy reading a story to them at a certain time, as well as if I can get somebody else to do the same. But then also talk with Melissa Schultz and Diane Weiss to come in and have just an open forum with parents about literacy and strategies. Just listen to parents talk of what they see and what they try to do and what kind of questions their kids ask, and give some guidance to them on that option, just in a different classroom at that evening, and have have some high school helpers again in there working with the little ones when maybe the parents want to sit in and listen to and ask some questions. So looking at just putting some formats together on that right now, it's just something that'll come together somewhere around July 20th. And then the alternative of that would be they can check out up to 10 books or something to that effect. But then on August 17th, which is during our registration time, they would have another opportunity during that time to come bring those books back, and then have probably not as much of an evening, let's say, because of the registration work that's going on at that time, but certainly be able to return the books that they checked out and then check out new ones, which would then come due whatever rate, we'd be right at the beginning of the school year. So something that just toying with that idea, and it's taken some interesting shape, and excited to see how that goes. And then lastly, update on child care survey. So the survey's been out there a number of weeks, and had 25 responses and from parents, and of those 25 responses would add up to 27 students who are desirable of after-school care. Of those 27, 22 agreed to pay for the $10 to $12 per day, let's say for the week or whatever, and then commit to a semester's worth of time. So again, I'll just run through those numbers again. 25 responses, totaling 27 students, and 22 of those responses agreed or said they would commit to the $10 to $12 per week cost, or I'm sorry, per day cost, and then the commit to the full semester at a time, so we can do our managing. Essentially there were 5 people that said, I want part-time, I don't want to pay $10 for a day when they're not there, that kind of stuff. So any questions on that in general? That's pretty much the entire survey. But
What's our next step with that, Mike? I mean, are we going to move forward with that? Are we?
I think that now with this information just kind of coming in, it kind of came in fast right off the bat, but then over the last week, it's a couple have trickled in, so kind of just left it until this opportunity to share with you. And now I think we sit down, David and I sit down and decide really, and decide what we would want to, proposal of some kind, I'm assuming. But again, just listening to, it's really hard, because this is exactly why the YMCA did not stay. There's just, you're teetering on a number. I think David and I had shared 20, and now we're looking at 22. So you're right at, you're right at a number that, how is it, how is it sustainable, I guess? And if you're going to hire 2 people within the younger group, let's say you have a K2 group and a 3-5 group or something to that effect. Granted, this is most of the need seemed to be around, focused on the elementary grades. So are there, I don't know, middle school.
This was just for after school though, right?
Correct.
No before school.
Correct. And one of the things that, I was talking to a parent the other day about this very thing, and summer care came up and how they wish they could have the YMCA back. And I know I've explained that situation 10 times. Not one person has come to me and asked me for summer care. And that just, as I thought about it, I was like, no, nobody, not one person over the course of, 2 years has asked me about summer care. So that's why it was not included. And then what we heard the night of the parent conversation was all about young elementary after school care.
Yeah, and I think with this data, I mean, we can dig in a little bit closer. You know, we kind of figured kind of a minimum for staffing that we would need, that $10 to $12 per day, kind of for every student. We'd need the commitment, because if we're going to hire staff, we can't have them come and go. That we need to know that that's going to be there, because we're going to pay the staff to be there, whether there's 5 kids there or 20 kids there. And we believed that there needed to be a couple of people, not just one person. So there were a number of factors. So that 22 is, yes, it's over that 20, but is it sustainable? I think is really the question. I think the feedback that I had received, to this point in time from the board is that the district is not at this time necessarily investing or interested in investing in subsidizing the program. So it would have to kind of run self-sufficiently. So it's a scary venture if we don't have a little bit more interest than what we have. So I guess if you're listening and you know people that really need it, that survey link's still live. Go put it in there. But we definitely need to have a little bit more buffer than that, I think, to be able to run something. But we will sit down and we'll run the numbers again, and we'll take a look and see what we can do. And I'll come back. We'll come back in July and continue to keep you posted.
Any other questions for Mr. Johnson? Thank you. Mr. Mullenberg.
Thank you, Julie. Well, as you're aware, we had our graduation ceremony on Memorial Day weekend. The weather was tenuous for a while there, but luckily it held out. We had a couple of sprinkles, I think, right when it started, and people were a little bit nervous. But I want to thank the custodians, Mike and Norm and Bruce and Nathan that came in, and David came in with his backpack blower as well to blow off the water off the seats, and thank all those guys for their help getting that ready. I know that was a big venture, and we were watching the radar quite a bit. I'd like to thank Jack and Lori for handing out diplomas. Did a great job with that again. I had a lot of good feedback. The wind that day was a little bit, caused us a little bit of troubles with some of the sound, obviously, in the back, especially coming from the south. If it would have been coming from the north, probably would have been a little bit better. The setup was better. I thought we had the stage closer, which was nicer. We had more seats. We will be adding 80 more seats next year to get to 400 on the field. It seemed like there was a lot of people in attendance. That's the most I've seen in quite some time, if not ever. I mean, the bleachers were quite full, and the seats on the field were as well. A lot of positive feedback that I've had for that outdoor ceremony. So that's something that I would like to continue for us to do as well. And it lends itself for that receiving line outside. The graduates, I talked to the students as well. They like it outside. They feel like it's more of a formal event having it out there. So I don't know if you've heard any other feedback on it as well. But I think the second year, we learned things the first year, and we learned a few more things the second year as well. But I think as we refine it, that this becomes a better ceremony for everybody involved. End of the school year, we had our high school finals. Report cards were sent out, and it was kind of nice the last day of school. We were also able to have a pep rally for our athletes that were going to state and track. So it was kind of a nice way to do that. And we had an assembly for the middle school and handed out awards and achievements as well. So I thought it ended well. It seemed like it came at the right time. Students were ready. Staff was ready. So I thought everything ended on a high note for sure.
Any questions for Mr. Mullenberg? Thank you. Mr. Brockup?
Yeah, that's all right. So just a few things here. As Mr. Mullenberg talks a little bit there, we had a school year that didn't start the way that I would have anticipated my first year as a superintendent starting, with the uptick in COVID that happened, and just as a board and as a community, we've dealt with a lot this year. That said, I think it was a good school year, and students were back in the school. We were here all year, and we were able to stay and do that safely. So I think that's a huge accomplishment accomplishment for the year. Just a huge thank you to our staff and our students and families for that great school year. I had on here the thank you to the staff for attending the engagement session with Nexus. Their input, their voices were incredibly important to that process, and we'll continue to use that as we continue to look at the study session tomorrow night. Thank you to our community members that were engaged in our engagement session in early June, and just an open invite to community members that are having questions. Maybe you've seen the meeting tonight, have some additional questions, please reach out to me, and would love to help provide more information and make sure that everybody understands what it is that we're looking at and what we're working towards. We had a nice retiree luncheon at the end of the year. It was great to see some of our former employees of the district and celebrate our new retirees. And I wish them and the other staff that are moving on from our district all the best as they move forward. Going back a little bit to what Rick had said, just a huge congrats to all of our students and student athletes and student musicians, and finishing the year well with it, whether it be at solo ensemble or all the way to our baseball team going to the state finals this year. I had an opportunity to just kind of welcome the team back when the baseball team got back from Appleton, and just kind of reviewed that throughout the course of the year, the Bangor School District sent students to state competitions in cross country, in wrestling, in girls hockey, in boys basketball, in gymnastics, in track, and baseball. Am I missing one more? Thank you.
Wrestling.
And in wrestling, yeah. So we had 6-7 teams or groups of athletes that sent off to the state competitions, and that's special, and that's something that the community definitely shows up and has a lot of pride in, and just a great thing to watch those student athletes and the growth that they go through that in those experiences, maybe outside of the classroom. That they don't see in the regular classroom. So just a huge congratulations to those. It's been a fun year. Best of luck to our seniors moving forward. And then lastly there, just a reminder that tomorrow night the board will meet in the LMC or in the library for the study session with Nexus. We'll meet at 5:30, and I'll have some pizza there for you guys. So bring your own beverages so that you can have what you want that way. So we'll get that rolling tomorrow night. Any other questions for me?
Thank you. So removal of items from the consent agenda. I just will read through the consent agenda. We have a few things on there. Current openings, which are listed. The summer school contracts, all of our staff, and for summer school. The WIA membership agreement, which is in your packet. Resignation of softball assistant coach Paul Fertier. Hire of the eighth grade volleyball coach, Kelly Laufenberg. Hire of C-team volleyball, Haley Jones. And then a copy of coaching contracts and our current coaches for the upcoming school year. Did I miss anything?
No, I would just add on that current openings that I will have a recommendation for approval for our elementary music position at the July meeting for sure. We had a verbal yes today, so that's exciting stuff.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Shelley, seconded by Lori to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Do we have closed session?
Do not have closed session.
All right. I ask for adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, go ahead, Joan, I'll second.
Motion by Joni, seconded by Lori to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.